Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Fall FedEx Worldwide Technologies Data Dive Show. Got a lot to get into. We have a forecast to look at, to update and look at some field changes, and I've done a little bit of research that I want to share with you all this evening in the hopes that it will provide you the optimal players to focus on this week for your wagers and your DFS lineups. Let's not waste any time. Let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is the best tool out there for golf analytics. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler, a much better golf DFS player. Anything you are wanting to see analytics-wise for golf, Fantasy National will have it. Go check out fantasynational.com. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X or Twitter and Instagram, where I posted some research earlier today around some comparison courses for El Cardinal. So hopefully you have seen that. If not, go follow or go to the link in the description for all of my social media handles and see the research that I posted today and what I think are going to be some good comparison courses. X and Twitter is also where I post my betting cards every week for the PGA Tour. That'll be no different. Those come out every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. I went ahead and fired off several players that I like at their numbers today. So if you want to see the weekly betting cards I make for the PGA Tour, give me a follow over on social media, or X specifically. And then lastly, for social media, Gabe's X handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. It is free to subscribe to do so. And if you are a subscriber to his article, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chats every Wednesday evening as we continue the DFS talk over there. So go show Gabe some support and follow him over on social media. Subscribe to that article. Lastly, we are live. Chat's open. Want to hear from you all. Have you all made any wagers yet for the Worldwide Technologies Championship? If so, who are you thinking? What do you think is going to play well here? All that good stuff. So let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2023 Fall FedEx Worldwide Technologies Championship. And we're going to start as we always do on a Monday evening, if my camera will focus. I believe that my camera has now decided to focus. Thankfully, unfortunately, wasn't going to cooperate on the first go-around. But we are here at Windfinder for this week's forecast down in Cabo, where El Cardinal is. And not a lot of wind right now in the forecast, which is a little bit surprising, at least for the comparison courses that I mentioned in the intro. A lot of times wind plays a decent factor at those tournaments. But you see Thursday, very, very calm and actually pretty darn pleasant, a high of 80 all throughout the majority of the week, or at least tournament week. Now the wind could look like it could pick up a little bit on Sunday with no super forecast. Hard to say, but as of right now, I don't see anything that would force us to want to look at some wind metrics. So with that, we normally go to Fantasy National. I'm actually going to close out of the Windfinder, but we're going to go to Microsoft Excel, and we're going to do a little bit different tonight since this is a brand new course. And we went through hole by hole last night over on Pro Visualizer. So I'll bring up the new course template as a little bit of a review here. These yardages are per Pro Visualizer. Pro Visualizer has the course listed about 20 yards longer than the GCSIA tournament fact sheet, but nothing astronomical in the sense that we can't use this data. So El Cardinal, par 72, two par 5s and 2 par 3s on each 9. We have a pretty short par 3 at 154, and then the other 3 par 3s are right around 200 yards. We have a 193, we have a 204, and a 205. So as we go through this evening, especially when we go through the par threes, we're going to be wanting to look at, probably more so the 200 to 225, especially if they lengthen that 193-yard par three. Hard to say what they're going to do, but my guess is we're going to want to look at a lot of 200-plus yard par threes. Par 4 wise, we have two, and I called them semi-drivable par 4s last night. It will all depend on the conditions, if they're extremely firm, the amount of carry down in Cabo. So I think for the bigger hitters, they might be drivable. So two semi-drivable par 4s, two short par 4s, but the majority, or at least half of our par 4s, fall from 450 to 500. We do have one long 504 par 4 at El Cardinal. And then the par 5s, I'll swivel out of the way, two extremely short par 5s, both measuring under 550 yards. And I mentioned this last night, but even so, or just to reiterate it, if you are a showdown player, round 1, round 2, you're really going to focus on the players that are starting on hole 10, because these two short par 5s are hole 18 and hole 1, so they will be played back to back for only half the field, and they are pretty darn good eagle chances in my estimation. So any showdown lineups that you are wanting to construct, I'm going to heavily suggest you focus on the players that are starting on the back 9 to get you that good chance at a 3 birdie streak. But two short par 5s, then we have a medium length par 5 and a long par 5 measuring 604. But I believe all 4 of these par 5s will be attackable in 2, would be my guess. The only one that wouldn't be is actually the mid-length one, as I believe the jungle kind of penalty area, not water, but just jungle and natural habitat, actually comes fairly close to the green. Is my as we looked in fantasy, or gosh dang it, as we looked in Pro Visualizer last night, I believe it was hole 14, that mid-length par 5, the native area seemed to get fairly close to the green. So I imagine pros, if they want to be conservative, they have the option to do so on that hole. But all of these par 5s really, I do think, are attackable in 2. And then we also did the estimated proximity per Pro Visualizer. Again, all 4 of the par 5s on Pro Visualizer are set up as true 3-shot holes. If you're like me and believe that they are going to be attacked in 2, you would move all 4 of these into the 200 plus. And you see we've got quite a few 175 and 200 plus approaches, due to the fact that the majority of our par 4s are pretty long, 450 to 500. And then the attackable par 5s do have a few shorter approaches, especially if these par 4s aren't drivable. Then you might get a few in the 100 to 125 range, maybe 1 or 2 into the 75 to 100. But again, for the most part, I believe we're looking at longer approaches. This is a longer course after all. So that is a little bit of a review from last night. The whole composition chart and the estimated proximity per Pro Visualizer. Now I'm going to bring up the comparison course chart that I typically use, and we didn't look through this last night, but as I researched some more today, I really do feel like there are a couple of very good comparison courses, and I want you to notice some things that play similarly at these courses, and that's what we're going to be looking at tonight when we go to Fantasy National. So again, these are Paspalum greens. Paspalum is most widely used in the Caribbean. So we're looking at the Puerto Rico Open, Cocoa Beach. We're looking at the Corrales Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic. Of course, the Mexico Open, which is just across the Gulf of California from Cabo in Vallarta, the Mexico Open. So those three courses all use paspalum, but not only that, they all measure over 7,400 yards as well. So all three of those courses line up very, very nicely with El Cardinal. Now, I understand that you might be asking yourself, why aren't we using Mayakoba, since this is that week's tournament, El Camaleon, it's in Mexico. Well, Mayakoba, the El Camaleon, is a short course. It's very short. So I did not like the comparison there. And because most of these courses, especially Puerto Rico and the Corrales, we don't have the strokes gained data. There's no shot link. I didn't like the feel of Mayakoba the same as I do these other tournaments that are on the PGA Tour. Now, we do have some strokes gained data for the Mexico Open, but we'll see how much we really want to dig into that. Not sure how much, but there are a few statistics we're going to be looking at. So we'll be focused on these three courses here in these three tournaments, and hopefully I've got those highlighted well enough for you. Again, these are long courses, at least over 7,400 yards, paspalum greens. All of them are in the Caribbean. In fact, Vallarta is pretty darn close to Cabo, just across the Gulf. So you see no shot link data for two of these courses. For Vallarta and Vedanta, the Mexico Open, a heavy emphasis in off the tee. You think about the two winners at the Mexico Open, Jon Rahm in its inaugural year in 2022, and then this past season was Tony Finau. Jon Rahm finished second. So a lot of off the tee, a lot of approach around the green simply does not matter at Vallarta, and you have to be able to putt these paspalum greens well. So we're definitely going to be looking at some paspalum putting performance, all of it going to be at Mexico. But this is where some of the consistencies will really start to show themselves. Look at the distance for two of these three courses. Puerto Rico Open, in fact, more than double the importance, 106% more important, double the importance of the average full field consistent course. You look at Vallarta, 116%, more than double the importance. Distance is a huge factor at both of those places. Now, Corrales is actually slightly under in terms of distance, but I do believe there is an outlier in that. So if we take a look at Corrales, in fact, 2 years ago, you see that this number is negative. If we remove that, it is a very, very clear outlier on the low side. If we remove that, you see Corrales actually starts to come in at 35% more important. Certainly not to the level of the other two, Puerto Rico and Mexico, but still heavily emphasizing distance. So that is why I believe that distance is going to be a pretty darn big factor this week for the Worldwide Technologies Championship at El Cardinal. Even though Tiger has set this up to where you have multiple angles of attack on each hole, you can be aggressive, you can lay up and play to your wedges. There is not a lot of trouble on this course, and I really do believe the aggressive player is going to benefit the most. And just like we were talking about last night, since there is literally zero rough on this course, the fairway cut will extend to the bunkers, to the native area. There is no rough. Fairways is absolutely not anything we're going to be looking at because this whole course is fairway or native penalty area. Greens, not a big factor either. These greens are massive at El Cardinal, 8,400 square feet. Now, Vedanta, just due to the fact that it is an extremely long course, it is almost 7,700 yards. Greens actually do become a fairly important factor there, but you see Puerto Rico and Corrales, it's not really a big deal. So in the driving and greens page view in Fantasy National, we're going to be focused solely on driving distance. And again, I understand that the Corrales is minus 4% here. Hopefully you were here a couple of minutes ago where I showed there is a big outlier. And if we remove that, it actually becomes closer to 35%. So big focus on driving distance. Now, with these alternate field events, which two of these three are, the mistake, the misconception that a lot of people have is that they are birdie fests. They aren't. Puerto Rico and Corrales generally are pretty average in terms of scoring difficulty. You see the Eagles, there's quite a few at Puerto Rico, not at Corrales. Mexico, a decent amount. All three of these courses, Puerto Rico slightly, just only slightly, favoring the bogeys avoided. But look at Corrales. Look at Mexico Open and Vedanta. Both of these are 10+% more important in terms of bogey avoidance. So do we want to look at bogey avoidance when a course is easy? Do we want to look at bogey avoidance when a course is long? Both of those do make some sense. I'm thinking more so probably bogey avoidance on long courses. But that was very, very interesting for me to see today, is that all three of these courses actually promote bogey avoidance as opposed to birdies gained. And that's a big misconception around the thought process, especially of these alternate field events, because those courses aren't necessarily the easiest. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot we'll be able to gain in terms of par 3s, 4s, and 5s, just because each course is set up differently. But if we want to go through it, the par 3s are heavily emphasized at 2 of the 3 comparison courses. The par 4s, one column too far. Par 4s, maybe something here. The par 4s are all mitigated in importance. Now you see Vedanta actually does have a drivable par 4, but neither of the other two do. The 450 to 500, the Corrales really de-emphasizes those. I don't know how much I want to put into any specific lengths here, but it is a little bit telling, I think, that the par 4s are all mitigated here. But something else that is common among all three of these courses is that the par 5s are heavily emphasized. 22% in Puerto Rico, 23.5% at Vallarta. Even the Corrales is 3% more important for par 5s. Now the Corrales, all of that comes into the 600 to 650, which there's only one of those here at El Cardinal. So again, not sure how much I'm going to pay attention to the specific length, but it is telling that all three of these courses emphasize par 5s as well. So that gives you an idea of some of the data that I have seen today as I was digging through some of these players, some of these courses, and some of the commonalities I've seen between them. Last thing, we can take a look at proximity, although only Vallarta has proximity. You see it emphasizes 175 to 200 significantly. Maybe that's something. Not sure what I'm going to do with proximity. I think it's probably going to be total prox for me personally, just because we don't have prox numbers for Puerto Rico and Corrales. But again, the takeaways here are these comparison courses for El Cardinal, or at least the comparison courses I think fit the best. These Caribbean events, the ones that have pass palm greens that are over 7,400 yards, they all emphasize par 5 scoring. Surprisingly, they all mitigate par 4s. Also, surprisingly, they are promoting bogey avoidance. Puerto Rico is pretty much full field course average, but the other two really emphasize it. So bogey avoidance. But the biggest thing, the absolutely biggest commonality between all of them is the distance. They all promote distance. So with that, we've got a few metrics now that we can take a look at in Fantasy National. So with that, let's head on over there and we'll start with the strokes gained. Let's go with off the tee. So your top strokes gained off the tee players in the field this week for the Worldwide Technologies, in the last 36 rounds: Ludwig Aubert, Brent Grant, Kevin Yu, MJ Duffy, Doug Gim, Cameron Champ, Trevor Cohn, Keith Mitchell, Luke List, and Cameron Young. Do note, I'm going to have to look for one player, and I need to make a note. So I am starring Joel Damon, and I starred Kevin Streelman earlier. Those two have withdrawn from the WWT. I'm just going to make it easy and acronym it. But those two have withdrawn this week, so make sure you make note of that if you were thinking about wagers or, in your early process of lineup building, lineup construction. Those two have withdrawn. All right, so there's your top off the tee players in the field this week. Of course, we don't want to ignore strokes gain approach. So your top strokes gain approach players the past 36 rounds in the field this week: Lucas Glover, Mark Hubbard, Sam Ryder, Kevin Roy, Doug Gim, Ryan Moore, Ches Reavie, Russell Knox, Andrew Putnam, and JJ Spawn. Again, skipping Kevin Streelman, he's withdrawn. I am going to be under the belief that the around the green isn't going to matter a lot. It doesn't at Vedanta for the Mexico Open. It does at Corrales, however. But I just don't see around the green being too much of a factor. I'm seeing this more as proximity and putting, with these greens being so massive. So with that, we're going to take a look at some paspalum putting. But do note that this is only for the Mexico Open. And the Mexico Open started in 2022. That's the only rounds. Even though we have 24 rounds of paspalum, the specifically putting data, as you see here, only comes from Vedanta. So I want to make that known to you, the viewer, before you assume that the Corrales and the Puerto Rico is factored into this as well. It is not. It is just Vedanta. But our top putters on paspalum greens, essentially the Mexico Open the past 2 years: Davis Riley, Brandon Wu, Cameron Champ, Ben Taylor, Kelly Craft, Akshay Bhatia, Aaron Baddeley, Emiliano Grillo, Ben Griffin, and Hank Lebioda. Okay. A couple other things we can look at. We can take a look at some performance on long courses. So when a course is long, or defined by Fantasy National as over 7,400 yards, our top performers, going back to the beginning of 2022 because there's not enough rounds: Michael Kim, Matt Kuchar, Nate Lashley, Nico Echeverria, the winner of the Puerto Rico Open this past year, so it's always good to see that. Chris Kirk, Akshay Bhatia, Harry Hall, JJ Spawn, Cameron Young, and Jimmy Walker. I don't suppose it hurts to take a look at performance in calm winds, since we've seen the forecast. It looks pristine for this week. Not enough rounds. You see, I don't use the wind calm filter very often. So we'll stay with the beginning of 2022. Your top performers in calm winds: JJ Spawn, Adams Vinson, Keith Mitchell, Cameron Young, Party Marty Laird, Taylor Pendrith, Matty Schmid, Taylor Montgomery, Maverick McNeely, and Sahith Tagala. All right, I believe that's going to do it for the strokes gained page view. Nothing to do with green speeds. We looked at past Palom. We looked a little bit at long courses. Of course, no architect data. This is an Eldrick Woods design. So his first design that's being used on the PGA Tour. So now let's go to fairways and greens. And I'll bring this into 2023. And we saw from the comparison course chart, the comparison courses, they all emphasize distance. So our top driving distance players in the field this week, the last 36 rounds: Peter Quest, Kyle Westmoreland, Cameron Champ, Ludwig Aubert, Matty Schmid, Brent Grant, MJ Duffy, Cameron Young, Keith Mitchell, and Callum Tarrant. Something that I believe we looked at last night. In fact, let's just go ahead and do it tonight before I forget. I do think this is going to be pretty darn easy. So let's take a look at total performance when it's easy. So when a round is easy, your top total performers this calendar year have been Ludwig Aubert, Doug Gim, Chris Kirk, Stefan Jaeger, Luke List, Peter Quest, Tyler Duncan, Bo Hostler, Callum Tarrant, and Marty Doe. And the reason why I remembered that, because let's take a look at driving distance in a couple of different ways. Let's take a look at driving distance when it's easy. So our top driving distance players when a round is easy this calendar year: Cameron Champ, Peter Quest, Brent Grant, Trevor Cohn, Cameron Young, Ludwig Aubert, Callum Tarrant, Matty Schmid, Will Gordon, and Ryan Brim. So a lot of the same names, but a few new ones, including Will Gordon, who jumps into the top 10 for driving distance when it's easy. Of course, you'll have Cameron Champ. He's always going to be up there in driving distance. Ludwig Aubert has established himself as one of the longer hitters already in his young tenure on the PGA Tour. So there's a look at a couple of different ways to look at driving distance. I don't know if driving distance on long courses is going to show it. Because on long courses, players are going to have to hit driver anyway. If you're interested, here's the list. I don't think I would put too much value into this, and I'll have to increase this to 2022. But your top driving distance players on long courses: Cameron Young, Cameron Champ, Matty Schmid, Kyle Westmoreland, Ryan Brim, Trevor Cohn, Brent Grant, Luke List, Keith Mitchell, and Kevin Tway. So again, a lot of these very, very same names, although Kevin Tway does rise for driving distance, specifically on long courses. But that is everything we're going to be looking at for the driving or fairways and greens page views, all about the distance based on those comparison courses. We'll move to birdies and bogeys. And look, I think I'm going to be using birdies or better this week in some fashion or form. I'm probably going to be looking at opportunities, especially since I think this is going to be easy. But you can't ignore the fact that all three of those comparison courses also emphasized or promoted bogey avoidance. So we've got a lot to look at in this page view. So we're going to start. I'm going to go ahead and go straight into the easy to par filter, as I do think this will be easy this week. So your top opportunities gained players in the field this week when a round has been easy this calendar year. Actually, I'm going to bring this in. It's a good thing I checked. This calendar year, when a round is easy, your top opportunities gained players: Ludwig Aubert, Chris Kirk, Tyson Alexander, Carson Young, Ryan Palmer, Callum Tarrant, Tyler Duncan, Bo Hostler, Isaiah Salinda, Doug Gim, and Cameron Young. Now, most of these players are solid in birdies or better gained as well, the exception of Tyson Alexander. He's given himself a lot of opportunities, but he's not converted them. So probably his putter has let him down, would be my guess. He's been slightly okay on bent, but been extremely poor on POA. So there's his story. But he's given himself a lot of opportunities. Other places here, Ludwig Oberg, number 1 in opportunities, number 1 in birdies or better. It's a pretty darn good combination. Chris Kirk's top 10 in both. Callum Tarrant's 6th and 11th. Cameron Young's top 10 in both. Tyler Duncan 7th and 12th. Isaiah Salinda 9th and 19th. That's an interesting name to see there. So there's a look at opportunities gained when a round has been easy. Here are your top birdies or better gained players when a round's easy. Ludwig Oberg, Peter Quest, Luke List, Harry Higgs, Taylor Montgomery, Cameron Young, Akshay Bhatia, Marty Doe, Chris Kirk, and Peter Malnati. I am more so kind of leaning in towards the bogey avoidance on long courses, but your top bogey avoiders when a round is easy. Doug Gim, Austin Cook, Stefan Jaeger, Ryan Moore, Taylor Pendrith, Bo Hostler, Chris Kirk, Henrik Norlander, JJ Spawn, and Russell Knox. But as I mentioned, I'm much more inclined to look at bogey avoidance on long courses. And we'll have to expand the timeline here. So our top bogey avoiders on long courses, going back to the beginning of 2022, Nate Lashley, Bo Hostler, Jonathan Bird, Brandon Wu, Peter Malnati, Michael Kim, Matt Kuchar, Thomas Detry, Aaron Baddeley, and Augusto Nunez. So that's where I am focused on in this page view. A lot in the bogey avoidance for or on long courses. I'm sure I'm going to have some birdies or better game because I do think this is going to be a big time scoring fest, birdie fest. With the size of these greens, I think opportunities is pretty prudent to look at as well. So that's where my focus is on that page view. Moving into proximity. I'm going to remove the filters. Let's just take a look at proximity in a high level view. Our top total prox performers the past 36 rounds: Lucas Glover, Ryan Armour, Michael Kim, Ches Reavie, Charlie Hoffman, Russell Knox, Ludwig Oberg, Ryan Moore, Henrik Norlander, and JJ Spawn. Again, my focus is going to be on the total prox because these greens are so massive. If you want to look at slice it a couple of different ways, proximity when it's easy: Lucas Glover, Robbie Shelton, Doug Gim, Ryan Moore, Chris Kirk, Stuart Sink, Ryan Palmer, Brandon Wu, Ches Reavie, and David Lingmerth. I think this is going to be a little bit too narrow. That's why I'm just solely focused on the total prox. However, the 175 and 200 plus you could absolutely take a look at as well. And I thought it was going to be the 200 plus more so last night. Looking at the Mexico Open, which is only one of the 3 comparison courses, but it had such a huge emphasis on 175 to 200, and the fact that there seemed to be quite a few approaches from 175 to 200 available here at El Cardinal as well. Maybe starting to lean 175 to 200 if I were to choose one. So your top performers from 175 to 200: Justin Lauer, Ches Reavie, Austin Eckroat, Marty Doe, Cameron Champ, Michael Kim, Chris Kirk, Stefan Jaeger, Lucas Glover, and Patton Kazire. And your top 200 plus: Augusto Nunez, Charlie Hoffman, Peter Quest, Justin Suh, Kevin Tway, Austin Eckroat, Cameron Champ, Sahith Theegala, Taylor Pendrith, and Harrison Endicott. But again, my focus is going to be on the total prox. But there's a couple of different ways you can look at proximity this week. We'll move into pars 3s, 4s, and 5s. No historical evidence to look at. I don't want to put a whole lot of emphasis in those comparison courses since they are set up differently than El Cardinal. My guess is we're going to want to look at total par 3s and maybe the 200 to 225. So your top par 3 performers in the field this week, the last 36 rounds: Lucas Glover, Russell Knox, Peter Quest, Carson Young, great performer at the Zozo, Kinsei Harada, Mark Hubbard, Aaron Baddeley, Brian Stewart, Andrew Putnam, and Justin Suh. Those are your top total par 3 performers. If you want to look at just the 200 to 225, Carson Young, Keith Mitchell, Davis Thompson, Austin Eckroat, Sahith Theegala, Brian Stewart, Ches Reavie, Kinsei Harada, Cameron Young, and Justin Lauer. So a lot of these same names here. Carson Young, Brian Stewart, Harada, Russell Knox just outside the top 10 from 200 to 225. Lucas Glover just outside the top 10 in the specific length. You got Davis Thompson, who's third at the specific length, just inside the top 15 for total par 3s. So there's a look at what I'm seeing for the par 3s. Par 4s, now these were mitigated. They're probably going to be mitigated a little bit since we're going to have quite a bit of emphasis on the par 5s, but I don't think it's right to ignore them. So your top par 4 total performers: Bo Hostler, Glover, Chesson Hadley, Aubert, Adam Svensson, Colin Tarrant, Doug Gim, Luke List, Kelly Craft, and Roberto Diaz. Now, if there was a range, I think it's the 450 to 5 since half of the par 4s fall here. But again, I don't want to put a whole lot of emphasis in this because the par 4s do seem like they're being mitigated a little bit. But your top par 4 450 to 500 performers: Aubert, Bo Hostler, Taylor Pendrith, Keith Mitchell, Theegala, Lucas Glover, Chad Ramey, Martin Laird, Andrew Putnam, and Callum Tarrant. And you see it's pretty darn symmetrical with the top 10 in total par 4s. Andrew Putnam being 36th in total par 4s as the worst of these top 10s. Generally, 450 to 5s is where a lot of the professionals make their hay in par 4s on the PGA Tour. So there's a look at the par 4s. We'll end this off with par 5s, and we're going to have quite a bit of emphasis into this. Not sure if I want to put the 500 to 550 focus, because one of these is at 545. It could get stretched to into the 550 to 600 range, especially with the size of these greens. So I think we're just looking at par 5s, but we're going to have quite a bit of emphasis on it. So your top par 5 performers in the field this week: Davis Thompson, Stefan Jaeger, Scott Harrington, Ludwig Aubert, Will Gordon, Eric Van Rooyen, Harry Hall, Ryan Gerard, Peter Quest, and JJ Spawn. All right, we're going to go end the show off. We're going to go back to Microsoft Excel. I will show you the crux or the core of the research that I did today. So let me zoom in on this for you. What this is all of the players in the field this week. And in fact, before I forget, let me remove Joel Damon and Kevin Streelman. I gathered the players' performance at these 3 comparison courses going back to 2019, how they fared at each of those comparison courses. Now, I have to caveat that with one of the Corraleses is not in here, just due to the insane year that 2020 was. One of the Corraleses got moved to September of that year. So I did not include that in this data set because the Corraleses normally played in March. So I did not include the Corrales with Hudson Swafford as the winner, since that was played in September, not in March. But everything else is a full go here. I don't have this sorted in any specific way except for being alphabetical. But this will give you a good idea as to some of the players do have played all of these comparison courses well, and there's a couple of players I'm going to want to highlight for you all. But we can look at Aaron Baddeley. Now, he has not been great at Vedanta, but his Puerto Ricos, averaging a top 20 there. He's been pretty darn good at the Corrales, gaining almost 3 strokes per tournament. So 2 of the 3 pretty darn good, and then, field average at the Mexico Open. But the first name I'm going to highlight for you is Akshay Bhatia. You see, he has absolutely dominated these events. His short time on the PGA Tour, he's played each of these events once, so it's a very small sample size, but he's not finished outside the top 25. He had a 24th at the Corrales. He finished top 5 in last year's Mexico Open. He was a runner-up at the Puerto Rico this past year. So he has played these Caribbean-style events extremely well. Andrew Putnam is another player who's played well. He has not played the Corrales, but the tournaments he has played them well. Let's see. A couple more players down here. Brandon Wu will probably get a lot of attention. In fact, let me freeze probably these panes, I think is how I want to do this for you all. Yeah, that's what I wanted. So Brandon Wu has played the Mexico Open extremely well, averaging a 3rd place finish in the 2 years. He's averaged a 5th place finish at Puerto Rico, so 2 dominating events of the 3. Now, he has been pretty lackluster at the Corrales in 2 tries. So take that for what you will. Brandon Wu has been very, very good at 2 of the 3. Perhaps there's something about Corrales he just doesn't like. Bryce Garnett, the strokes gained total leader on Paspalum, or at courses with Paspalum. You see his records and such here. Top 30 average finish at the Corrales. Top 33 at Mexico. Top 20 at Puerto Rico. He's gained significant amounts of strokes at all 3 of those on an average basis. Again, the SG column is average per tournament. So Bryce Garnett has averaged gaining 4.2 total strokes in the 4 years. And I had to use total strokes gained because the Corrales and Puerto Rico don't have shot length, so I had to use strokes gained total. But Bryce Garnett's another name I want to highlight for you all. Similarly to Brandon Wu, you've got Chad Ramey. He won the Corrales in 2022. He did not play Mexico well at all, but he played Puerto Rico fairly well. So maybe there was something about Mexico he didn't like, but he did win one of these 2 or one of these 3 comparison courses, or win at one of these comparison courses. Let's see. Some other names here that kind of pop out. Doug Gim, tied for 16th at the Corrales, top 20 at Puerto Rico. He's played Mexico both years. He's gained strokes on average, but, pretty lackluster in terms of results. So someone to keep an eye on. Grillo has performed well at all 3 of the courses as well. Harry Hall is the second of the names that I want to highlight for you all. Just like Akshay Bhatia and his dominating performance, Harry Hall has not finished outside the top 15 at any of these tournaments. Harry Hall, 13th at the Corrales, 10th in Mexico, 7th at Puerto Rico. Granted, just like Akshay Bhatia, only 1 tournament at each, so a very small sample size, but stellar performance at all 3 of the comparison courses. So Harry Hall is somebody who I'm going to be, extremely overweight on, I'm sure, this week in Cabo. Nolander's played 2 of the 3 fairly well. Jonathan Bird, alternate who got into the field thanks to Joel Damon's withdrawal, has played all of these events pretty darn well, and in multiple events. 4 times at the Corrales has averaged a top 30. Both times in Mexico averaged a top 35. He's played Puerto Rico in games. So Jonathan Bird might be one of these 6K plays, or imagine he'll be a 6K play. One of these low-name players that you might want to take a look at to fill out your stars and scrubs lineups. Kelly Craft has played well at all three. K.H. Lee's played well at 2 of the 3, has not played Mexico, so you can't knock him for that. So he's played well at 2 of the 3, or when he has played them. Mark Hubbard has played all 3 of these extremely well. Michael Kim, a little bit less so on the Corrales, but played Mexico okay, and has played Puerto Rico very well. Nate Lashley has been stellar at all 3 of these. Now, I say stellar, I mean, he has more tournaments, so he's going to have more opportunity not to finish in the top 10, but Nate Lashley has played the Corrales pretty darn well, averaging 3 strokes gained per tournament. He's played both Mexico Opens very well, and he's averaged a 6th place finish in Puerto Rico in 3 tries. He loves Puerto Rico. So Nate Lashley is somebody else to really consider heavily this week, even though he backfired at the Zozo for me. I think this is another week I'm going to be heavily on Nate Lashley. Maybe just a couple more here. Sahith Theegala, he did not play Puerto Rico, but he's played the other 2 pretty darn well. Sam Ryder, runner-up to, was it Chad Ramey? I think he might have runner-up to Chad Ramey at the Corrales. So he played that one well. He's played Puerto Rico well. Sam Ryder's a name to look at who's played these well. Scott Piercy, at least surprisingly to me, has played all 3 of these events very, very well. So there's a look at some of the names and their performance, or I say some. There's a look at every player in the field this week, highlighting some of the names who have played very well at least 2 of the 3, if not all 3, of these comparison courses. So a little bit different take on the early look file because we don't have any shot link data for the Corrales for Puerto Rico. And of course, with this being the debut of El Cardinal, we don't have any historical performance at that course. So a little bit different look of a data dive show tonight, but one hopefully that I've still been able to give you some good information, some good insight on who to focus on in your wagers, who to look at in terms of DFS, and when those prices come out, who you might want to focus on. But that's going to do it for the Data Dive show tonight. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, watching, listening, and supporting the channel. It's always appreciated. I love what I do, taking an in-depth look at sports statistics and trying to give you all some insights from a statistician and a data analyst's perspective on trying to win a little bit of money in the process. A reminder that my research that I found and went into a little bit here this evening is found on social media. So if you are curious to see what I have put out, I ask you go follow the link in the description, and of course show Gabe some support and follow him over on social media. He writes a very good article as well. For all of the wagers that you have made so far this week for the WWT, for all of the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the WWT, and until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.